Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are diving deep into one of the most powerful art forms out there, the musical. We're going to trace its incredible journey from the very first shows that really tried to weave stories together with song, all the way to the massive blockbusters that you see on stage today. We'll figure out just how it mastered the art of telling a story through music and dance.
There's this unofficial motto in the world of musical theater, and it really gets to the heart of everything. It perfectly explains why characters suddenly burst into song. See, it's not just a random break in the action for a catchy tune. It's a storytelling tool. When a character is feeling something so intensely that words just aren't enough, they sing. And when even that incredible emotion is too much for a song, well, that's when they dance. This is the core idea, the fundamental rule that makes the whole thing work.
So, let's get down to it. What really defines a musical? Because it's so much more than just a play that happens to have some songs sprinkled in. In the best, most powerful musicals, the songs and the dances are absolutely essential. They're the tools that communicate everything from soaring love and white-hot anger to the most profound kind of loss. For this explainer, we're going to focus on a very specific type, and it's called the book musical. Now, this is the structure that completely revolutionized theater. Before this came along, songs in a show were often just, nice little diversions. Fun, but not essential. But in a book musical, every single piece, the music, the lyrics, the choreography, it all has one job: to push the story forward. But to really understand how the book musical got to be so dominant, we have to rewind a bit. We need to look at the key moments that made this whole revolution possible. Because this evolution, well, it had been building for decades. This journey toward integration started way back. I'm talking the 1870s, with guys like Gilbert and Sullivan. They proved that super witty, clever lyrics could be absolutely vital to the story. Then, decades later, in 1927, Showboat took this giant leap forward. It tackled serious issues like racism with music that was deeply, deeply woven into the story. These were the crucial building blocks that paved the way for what was coming next. And if we're going to talk about a revolution, we have to talk about one show, the show that basically created the blueprint for the modern musical as we know it. This wasn't just another hit. This was the moment that kicked off the entire golden age of Broadway. So while shows like Showboat had definitely laid the groundwork, it was Rodgers and Hammerstein's Oklahoma that really cemented the new rules of the game. It was a true milestone. I mean, it defied all the conventions right from its opening scene. There was no big, flashy chorus line. It just opened with a woman quietly churning butter and a single cowboy singing from offstage. Nobody had seen anything like it. So what was their secret? Well, Rodgers and Hammerstein basically perfected a new formula. First, the plot was king. Everything, and I mean everything, served the story. Second, the songs weren't interruptions anymore. They were essential scenes that actively moved the plot along. And third, and this is huge, dance became a powerful way to tell the story. The choreographer, Agnes DeMille, created these incredible ballets that explored a character's deepest psychological fears and desires. And with this new, sophisticated way of telling stories, the musicals suddenly had immense power. For the first time, it could tackle incredibly serious, heavy subjects. We're talking about spousal abuse in Carousel, racial prejudice in South Pacific, even the death of a main character on stage in The King and I. And all of this was happening in a commercial Broadway show. It was absolutely groundbreaking. Now, that golden age formula was king for decades, but you know how it is, right? Art never stands still. By the late 1960s, a whole new generation of writers and composers showed up, and they were ready to challenge everything that the classic musical stood for. And the shift was, well, it was dramatic. Shows like Hair came along and swapped out those big orchestral scores for rock and roll. They traded stories of idealistic romance for raw stories about the Vietnam War and social protest. It was loud, it was rebellious, and it brought a completely new energy and a whole new audience to Broadway. And then there was Stephen Sondheim. He was a true game changer who completely redefined what a musical could even be about. See, Sondheim wasn't interested in simple boy meets girl stories. He was a master of psychological complexity. He wrote these brilliant, intricate shows about messy marriages, obsession, and even revenge, all with a lyrical and musical genius that is still just unmatched. This quote from Sondheim himself just perfectly captures how the lines were starting to blur. Take his masterpiece, Sweeney Todd. Is it an opera or is it a musical? For Sondheim, the label didn't really matter as much as the context, where it was being performed and what the audience was expecting. The art form was getting more ambitious and way harder to pin down. So as we roll into the 1980s, the pendulum swings again, and this time it swings toward pure, unadulterated spectacle. This was the era of the mega musical, mostly coming from a British invasion led by Andrew Lloyd Webber and Cameron Mackintosh. We're talking huge, epic shows with pop opera scores, massive casts, and just jaw-dropping special effects, like a giant chandelier crashing to the stage or a helicopter landing in front of.
And the scale of success here was just unprecedented. The Phantom of the Opera ran for nearly 14,000 performances in its original Broadway run. It finally closed after 35 years. These shows weren't just hits anymore, they were global brands. They played for decades all over the world, completely redefining the financial expectations for a show and creating this massive international audience for musical theater.
Which brings us to today, to the modern stage. After a century of constant change and evolution, what actually defines a musical right now? Well, the landscape is this really fascinating mix of the super familiar and the totally groundbreaking. You know, familiarity has become a huge trend. We see tons of jukebox musicals, which are built around the hit songs of pop stars. We see stage adaptations of our favorite movies. And of course, there are always revivals of those golden age classics. But right alongside all of that, we're still seeing truly original, innovative shows finding their way to the stage. And just when you think you've seen it all, a show comes along that completely rewrites the rules again. In 2015, that show was Hamilton. And in a lot of ways, it created a new blueprint for the future, much like Oklahoma did all those decades ago. What Hamilton did was just brilliant. It took a story from American history and told it using the contemporary language of hip-hop, R&B, and pop music. It was proof that the American musical wasn't some museum piece stuck in the past. No, it's a living, breathing art form that can absorb any musical style to tell any kind of story. And it became a massive cultural phenomenon. So, if this whole history shows us one thing, it's that the musical's greatest strength is its ability to constantly reinvent itself. From the integrated stories of the Golden Age, to the rock and roll of the 60s, to the hip-hop of today, it has always absorbed the sounds and the stories of its time. And that leaves us with one really exciting question to think about. What's its next big number?